The technology nowadays that can address those issues is zero trust. And zero trust, although it has a negative language in it, we made it positive. We call it trusted user, trusted device. If you know the user is trusted, if you know the device is trusted, then you don't need to make their life difficult by enhancing your security. You can give them easier access, proper support, but at the same time with more rigorous testing and monitoring and control that you're putting in place.
The education landscape is constantly evolving. Staying ahead of the trends is essential. Welcome to EdBuzz LA County, where we explore groundbreaking initiatives, inspiring stories, and innovative practices shaping the future of learning here in Southern California. Today we look at why K-12 institutions have become prime targets for cybercriminals. These cyber attacks are more than just glitches. We're talking about the theft of sensitive student and staff data, financial breaches that drain resources, and disruptions that can halt learning for weeks, costing millions to recover. We're incredibly privileged to have two education technology leaders who are on the front lines protecting our schools against cyber threats. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Graswich, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Communications, and joining me are Jose R. Gonzalez, LACOE's Chief Technology Officer, and Soheil Katal, LAUSD's Chief Information Officer. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be here.
So we're going to start just to try to educate our community a little bit about what's going on with cyber security threats. So what are the top one or two threats that you're seeing, and why are schools so vulnerable?
So when you look at the cyber threat, typically we categorize in two levels. One is against the organization itself, another one against the third party. Third party right now is the biggest risk because that's where majority of the uncontrolled data essentially reside with the vendor that the organizations such as the schools are working with. And you're relying on what the vendor providing through those processes. You have audit, you have some limited control, but not extensively. The second one goes to the internal organization. I would say the biggest one right now is still continue to be the phishing attack, and then through the phishing attack, data exfiltration as a result of that phishing attack. These are the two I would say are the top on top of my mind. External and internal through the phishing attack are the top.
And there's so many things that school districts can do, but it's hard to pick which are the most important to invest in. So JR, from your standpoint, what would you recommend to school districts?
Absolutely. I think a really important part is to do annual penetration testing at least once a year, because you do need to look at both aspects, internal and external. So when you're doing these tests, you need to have your vendors also be assessed and audited. And then most importantly, I will say that the last 3 or 4 incidents that we had in LA County at our school districts could have been prevented with multi-factor authentication. So if you are only going to do one thing in your school district is turn on multi-factor authentication and start at the top. Start with your chiefs, with your superintendents, and then work your way down. It is tedious. It is quite a process, and a lot of times folks complain that they have to get this text message or some sort of multi-factor. But in the end of the day, that the FBI states that can prevent over 90% of most cyber incidents.
Well, and we know that technology is always changing. There's always new things on the horizon. Our teachers often want access to them, and so do students, because they're always looking for the best new thing. So how do you balance? So LAUSD is so big that need for access or desire for access with protecting everyone.
Sure. Obviously, especially during the pandemic, we realized the access was top priority because the students were not in the classroom, the technology was not easily available and everything else. There was a lot of effort, not just from LAUSD, but from every school district to really provide that access, even in instruction at home, which didn't exist to the extent that exists today, either through devices, connectivity, and everything else. But ultimately, you need to have a different strategy when you expand your horizon beyond the campus to be able to protect the data wherever the data is, either in campus or outside of campus. That's why you require more developed strategy for, as we call it, telecommute type of work, or people when they are not in the schools or campuses, to how they're going to be protected. The technology nowadays that can address those issues is zero trust. And zero trust, although it has a negative language in it, we made it positive. We call it trusted user, trusted device. If you know the user is trusted, if you know the device is trusted, then you don't need to make their life difficult by enhancing your security. You can give them easier access, proper support, but at the same time with more rigorous testing and monitoring and control that you're putting in place.
Well, and this question's really for both of you, because one of the parts is, do you know that the equipment or the technology itself is trusted? So how do you approach vendor vetting with all these tech tools that are out there?
I think a big part of it, and we're studying this at LACOE as well, is a good procurement process and really vetting the systems that are coming in. So we're currently working on a RFP that will basically be for all software vendors. That way, us at LACOE can vet these vendors so that the districts will have kind of a list of qualified vendors, right? We're not going to rank them or anything like that, but we are going to vet them and make sure that the technology is functional. We saw a lot of, especially during the AI rush, as we all noticed, everything had AI in it, and there was a lot of vendors out there doing AI that, it's better to really work through it and do the software, vetting up front.
Anything you'd like to add related to the vendor
Sure.
piece?
As it goes back to the third-party risk that I indicated is one of the top risk for any organization nowadays. And we developed a protocol years ago when we were working on selecting instructional tools for the school. It was mostly focused on instructional tools. And we built a platform actually for it back then that the vendor, not only after they go through the procurement process, they need to submit an answer to a specific question related to not just the security, but also instructional value, data privacy, and everything else. And it's a multi-departmental effort. This is not the job of IT to do everything. So we look at the security, but there are beyond security goes when you select the vendor. Efficacy and the value that you get from the product need to be vetted as well. So the vendors getting selected, added to that list, and the school could select from them. What we did over the last 2-3 years, we added every application to that platform. So not only instructional tools, when I'm saying instructional, it means content. Now, every application that the district is using must go through that vetting process. Another enhancement that we did that we realized, as JR mentioned, with the AI become new, you already have agreement with the vendor. You already vetted the vendor. Within 2 weeks, the vendor released AI functionality that was not vetted through your protocol and process. So that's why what we are doing, we're going back to add the recurring processing. Essentially, that vetting expires every year. The vendor need to reapply. At the same time, there are language in our contracts and also in our vetting process that the vendor must meet some requirement before turning on any functionality in their system that didn't exist before. So they cannot just go out of the blue and turn on AI or any other functionality without letting the district know. And district has the right to refuse of that function, even if it's free. Sometimes they offer it for free and people say, oh, I got it for free. No, free has a risk. Nothing is free. We are paying somewhere for that.
Right. I mean, I think that's such a great tip. And in a place, like you mentioned, AI kind of overwhelmed many places. And then to actually put in protocols in place for when that AI is added after the fact.
And that's critical as well. Working with your procurement team, I do see a lot of districts not working with the procurement team. And, a lot of times the procurement team is just kind of getting an RFP out and they're not talking to just everybody, including technology. So for our procurement team, they actually connect with us before the RFP even goes out, and we start vetting what the language looks like. And if it's a project, we now have a project management office, so the RFP doesn't even go out until they have a project management number attached to the actual product that they're trying to get.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, so these two parts, so that's the application safety, but then it's also really the people, right? And before we started, you talked about organizational culture and, that it really needs to become a cultural change. And so do you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Sure. So security as a whole essentially is a deterrent for access and essentially user friendliness. We all know that. There are two sides of the coin. But at the same time, mainly sharing the value of the security that we are putting in place for people, give them level of comfort. Right nowadays, JR also mentioned about MFA. Yes, MFA typically was difficult to implement. But when you look at it, like you go home, you use your bank account. It's impossible your bank account give you access without MFA. Every functionality, every vendor, every product, every resources nowadays requires it. That helps the culture shift, but at the same time, how much we do it through our cybersecurity trainings that we mandate for our employees, and how much we really emphasize the value and not just, hey, this is there to prevent you from something, but no, it's there to protect you, to prevent your data being accessed by somebody that's not supposed to have that access. So there are a lot of effort in that way. Most of it actually the help of the professional development, training, communication. We even have a cybersecurity training for students. So not because it's not limited to employee, they're essentially experiencing the same environment. And we have right now cybersecurity training for employee, a student. They're all mandated and they need to go through those trainings.
Right. And I think it's important I'll go back to the procurement side. If you do the homework up front, then you end up with a solid product that's implemented correctly. I mean, I've seen so many districts that have multiple software applications with different logins for this. The student has to remember multiple logins, and you could prevent that by putting that in your contractual language when you initially sign up for that system, so that it's easier to use for the students, right? User friendliness.
Well, and LACOE has been doing a lot more around cybersecurity training. I mean, that's something that I've really seen a change in under your leadership, which is really impressive. And so can you talk a little bit about the work that you all have been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just finished our cybersecurity tech talk. We did it here at Pico Rivera at the Albert Robles Water Replenishment District Center. And we had about 200 folks there. It was probably 45 different school districts that were represented, some county offices of education as well. And really, my approach to this has been that the knowledge is in the county, the knowledge is in the room. And so the folks that show up are C-level executives, directors of technology, and they all kind of just share their different issues, their different challenges. And for the first time ever, we actually had two CTOs that were part of a cyber incident that shared their experience, what happened, and they basically went through the whole story, the timeline. We found out on this date, this is what we did after that, this was the impact, this is how we recovered, this is how we got a hold of FBI and DOJ to get folks out there and resources. And I think that was a very vulnerable thing for them to do. But I think you modeled it, Soheil, when you guys had the cyber incident, that you started sharing the issue, that what happened. And in the past, it was kind of taboo and nobody wanted to talk about it. But it really, if we want to support each other, sharing those issues and challenges is important so that folks can be ready for whenever an incident happens at their district.
Well, and it's really an emergency now. And so you all have shifted in how you treat them, and you treat them like an emergency response, right?
Yes. And that's the only way that's really you can prevent it from happening, because most of your planning that you follow goes pre-planning, the development, detection, and monitoring to be able to implement a recovery and response. So all of these go hand in hand. Obviously, being effective in one side doesn't mean you need to let go of other side. That's why we adopted the NIST framework, because as a framework allows us to develop maturity around the entire cybersecurity framework, not just one area.
Well, and one of the big things in all of this is student data, right? And there's laws that protect student data, but obviously this is criminal attacks. They don't follow the laws. So, what can you do around that to protect student data?
I think the step one, minimize it as much as you can. I mean, especially goes back to the third party that I was referring to, because internally you can implement all the measure and you can monitor it. You can make sure the student data either encrypted, at rest, or protected from the need to know basis, so not everybody get access. But remember, every teacher, every administrator have access to those student data. So when you have a phishing attack happening on the end user side, you're always at risk of having a student data being exposed. The risk is what level of access you give and how much data. If you put the control and limit the data that can be exposed, then you reduce the risk. You're never going to be able to prevent it. You can just minimize and mitigate the risk. And same goes to the vendors. If the vendor doesn't need some data, do not send them the data. Just don't make your job easier or everybody's job easier. That doesn't mean the data should be in their hand. It's a need to know basis, and the vendor should be limited to what they need access.
And that goes back to the zero trust, right? You're only going to give them what they need. And a lot of times it's easier to just give them everything, but that's what puts your data at risk, right? This is all risk management.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the things that I think we've also seen is this cross collaboration, right? So you all communicate, and not just in LA County, which is huge in and of itself, but also across, Southern California, even maybe the state. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the county offices of education have a technology subcommittee under the California Superintendents Association, and we meet every quarter. And everybody is very open as well, shares all the best practices, any major challenges they've had. We invite FBI, DOJ to tell us about what the landscape looks like. And then we bring that back to the county. And we bring that back to our school districts and share those concepts. A lot of times it's additional resources that are free of charge. And then the other part is we're also doing our own assessments now through the County Office of Education, where we're doing one right now, if a district feels that they want their cybersecurity posture assessed, we can actually go out there and, we have an information system security officer that is with the county, and he has a small team, and they basically go out there and do threat assessments. They make recommendations, it's just a good way to get started. Just because most districts don't have an information system security officer, right? So most districts are small, and they don't need to, right? If they're a smaller district, we can step in and lean in and help them, work through any major challenges and make recommendations for them.
Yeah. Well, and then I hate to keep emphasizing your size, but you are so large. And so are there resources that you're aware of and use that other districts that maybe haven't had as much exposure?
Sure. Obviously, there are a lot of resources out there, although the number are shrinking. MSI SAC, for the fact, was one of them. It was free accessible to all the schools. Unfortunately, with the change of policy in new DC administration, the funding was removed from MSI SAC. Right now, they are actually trying to offer it as a subscription service. Hopefully, their cost is affordable for the smaller school district and they can do it. But definitely, that's one of the resources I would recommend. CISA is available. It was always available, and it's free. As JR mentioned, they offer the security assessment and other perspective. There is a key part that I think probably still is a gap in our state, at least I can say, and that's a security operations center. I mean, having a security operations center that 24/7 monitor any security threat that comes to the organization is a key component. With the school district our size, we were lucky enough to not only get the support from federal government, but we procured our own security operations center because we are large, but we are not 24/7 shop. That's why we need to procure this type of services from outside. So we established that security operations center about 3 years ago through a contract. And then obviously through the advocacy that we did in the White House and the FBI, we were able to essentially push with the movement of the security pilot program through FCC. So that pilot program, although it's a pilot, authorized schools to receive those funding for any security project they have. This year, in our application, we applied for Security Operations Center, and it was approved. And district received authorization from FCC to use that funding to pay for the next 2-3 years of our Security Operations Center. Obviously, that's one avenue, although application window now is closed, but I'm hearing there going to be some funding that's not spent. I encourage every school district to apply for that pilot program. and take the matter on their own hand. Another thing I always advocate, and this is part of our advocacy effort, I think Security Operations Center either is responsibility of the state or federal government. Small organization or big or large should not be responsible to monitor the threat that's coming from our adversary from other countries. There need to be better control. And hopefully one day we're going to see that.
And we are seeing recently, very recently, that the FBI has been notifying us when they see suspicious traffic. It's definitely not a full-blown security operations center as it should be. And I completely agree that the federal government should step up in that aspect. But we have gotten at least 2 or 3 tips from the FBI where an FBI agent shows up here to LACOE, part of just our relationships that we've built, and they hand us an envelope, and it's like, and the envelope has, suspicious IP addresses. And, we provide internet to about 63 different agencies across the county. So those IP addresses are tied back to LACOE. So we go out and investigate and find out, sometimes it's an old Cisco router or an old Cisco switch that no one realized was still on. But sometimes it is actually equipment that's being used. So there has, at least one of those cases, there was a major patching that had to be done to mediate the challenge.
Yeah, it's one of those roles that a lot of people don't realize that LACOE does, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a huge part of what you all do.
Yes.
I can't leave the conversation without going back to artificial intelligence and its impact on cybersecurity. What are you seeing that's happening now? Fears about the future with it, perhaps?
I think, like any other tools, it can be used in a good way and bad way. The bad actor are already using it. And look at the phishing attack that you're getting right now. Before, you had grammar error or some errors in the text, and there were a lot of guidance. Hey, read this, read that. You're going to realize it. Now they develop more sophisticated phishing campaign that is hard to detect by the use of Gen AI. There are many other functionality Gen AI provides for them. But at the same time, there are functionality in our side as well. For years, there was a lot of development, not on the generative AI, but in the machine learning, to allow us to be able to detect these type of events. In a monthly basis, in our district, we receive about 150 million events. And these events, they could be essentially very serious, or they could be minor. Out of these 150 million, we have our essentially security monitoring and security orchestration system that analyze these events to find out which one of them are real, which one are not. There is no way in 1 month anybody can analyze 150 million events. The only way you can do it is through this type of technology. And this really reduced our number to close to 120,000 after cleaning it with AI through our, we call it SIM source solution. And then eventually after that, we send it to our Security Operations Center, which, as I said, is outsourced. And they are balance it. Overall, in a monthly basis, we get 30,000 events that we need to investigate. And that's a job of our threat response team, that they essentially human in the loop. They evaluate, they verify, they follow up to close the case and make sure we prevent it before any serious incident.
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, we all have to start leveraging AI as well, because the bad actors are already doing it. Mm-hmm. So the different types of tools that analyze your logs and give you some sort of direction are going to be critical as we start to leverage AI.
I just want to add also, before we forget about, we should not forget, although usually there are two sides of the story. We talk about security, but we talk about data privacy. Mm-hmm. And the biggest risk with AI, how much data we are putting in those chatbots when we have a conversation, how much of that information are confidential or private information that should not be disclosed. And there are methods to protect the organization from that, as much as use internal controls, as well as training and culture definitely help to reduce those type of incidents.
And it ties back to your contracts and negotiations, right? You have to put in the right language in there to protect the student data.
Yeah. So interesting. So as we close, if there's one tip that you could give to a technology leader in a school district, knowing they have limited resources, but what would that tip be in terms of what they can do to prevent cyber attacks?
I think the first thing, adopt your framework. definitely build your framework, because that's that's your roadmap. But what you do down the road. And again, NIST framework, which was created by Obama's presidency administration, definitely is a very mature framework. Helps designed for public sector. It's not most of the design of the security architecture are for private sector. This was designed for public sector to protect the critical assets. And it is based on maturity. So you don't need to be perfect. You are in the journey to improve and protect yourself, depending on the sensitivity of the data or the risk that you can take. That's why NIST framework was very compelling for us. And I really recommend everybody to take a look at it, follow the framework, build the process around it, assessment, and anything else around it. And hopefully you get the result.
And for you, Jose?
Completely agree. I mean, you really have to do the assessment and baseline where you're at. There's a kind of a overall fear of doing the assessment, of doing the penetration testing, because if you find out you got to buy a new firewall or a new expensive piece of equipment, now you have to like follow through with that. So, create a capital improvement plan, right? Make sure your CFO is aware of what you're going to have to buy in 3 years, because, I've seen agencies that have a 20-year-old firewall just because, they haven't put it in the plan to upgrade it and update it. So until you put it in the budget, it's not going to happen. So really working with your CFO and making sure that you're planning ahead.
Yeah, absolutely great points. This has been an incredibly enlightening and vital discussion. I want to thank our guests, Jose R. Gonzalez and Soheil Katal, for being here and sharing their insights on how schools can stay safe and vigilant against cyber threats. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Graswich, and I'll see you next time on EdBuzz.